He told his kids back home in Texas that, yes, he had participated in the attack, and yes, he definitely had had a loaded gun with him during the entire thing. He also then threatened to kill his kids if they told anyone. He told his 18-year-old son and his 16-year-old daughter, quote, "If you turn me in, you're a traitor, and traitors get shot." The son that same day, the day that his dad threatened to kill him, met with an FBI agent, told him what he knew about his father's activities on January 6th, and gave him something. When the dad had told his son and daughter about having his loaded gun with him at the Capitol during the attack, turns out the son had been recording that conversation. And that day, when he met with the FBI agent, he gave the recording to the FBI. And so that kid's dad, that was the first man who was put on trial for his role in the January 6th attack. He's a man from Wiley, Texas. His name is Guy Reffitt. The attack on the Capitol building was January 2021. He was the first one put on trial. He was put on trial in March 2021. He was charged with 5 felonies. Armed trespassing, was found guilty. Obstruction of an official proceeding, found guilty. Interfering with police in a riot, guilty. Transporting a firearm for the purposes of interfering with police in a riot, also guilty. And the 5th felony he was charged with was witness tampering. He was also found guilty of that. Witness tampering, of course, for threatening to kill his own teenage son and daughter if they told anyone what he had done. It emerged during Guy Reffitt's trial that he was actually doubly armed in D.C. that day. He had an AR-15 assault rifle with him when he went to Washington. He apparently left that in the garage of his D.C. hotel on the day of the actual Capitol attack. But his loaded semi-automatic Smith & Wesson pistol, that one he had holstered on his hip the whole time while he led the pro-Trump mob in attacking police officers at the wing doors of the U.S. Senate. He also had flex cuffs with him, police-style heavy-duty zip ties, because he planned on tying people up. He recorded video of himself talking about how he was looking forward to dragging members of Congress out of the Capitol building, quote, kicking and screaming. Guy Reffitt is part of a pro-Trump armed paramilitary group called the 3 Percenters. That's a group that was reportedly well represented in Washington during the attack. It's also a group that has surfaced in other instances of physical intimidation against people Trump has targeted, people like Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers. It is now time for the court to hand down his sentence. Now, his defense lawyers have asked the judge to give Guy Reffitt less than 2 years in prison. Who knows? Federal sentencing guidelines suggest a term of more like 9 to 11 years in prison. But this is interesting, and this provides us some new insight. The federal prosecutors in the Guy Reffitt case have now asked the judge for something called an upward departure from the sentencing guidelines. Again, sentencing guidelines are for like 9 to 11 years. They're asking for the court to consider a longer sentence than that. They're asking the court to consider adding a sentencing enhancement in his case on the grounds of terrorism, on the grounds that what he did fits the statutory definition of terrorism. Quote, Reffitt engaged in acts of violence that were intended to influence the government through intimidation or coercion, acts that have been defined by statute as domestic terrorism. Now, it is up to the courts, up to the judge, whether or not to actually do that, to accept this terrorism enhancement on Guy Reffitt's sentence. But if the judge does agree to prosecutors' request on that, the practical consequence is steep. And the practical consequence is that prosecutors are saying this guy should get 15 years in prison. For context, that would be roughly triple the sentence that anybody else has received so far for their role in the Capitol attack. And that incident, that handling of that one case tells us a couple of things. First, it tells us that the U.S. Justice Department has concluded that it's okay to treat the January 6th attack as terrorism, as domestic terrorism. They have concluded at the Justice Department that in some cases, the perpetrators of that attack should be prosecuted as terrorists. And that should go off like the rocket's red glare to the 300 plus other defendants who are still waiting to go on trial on charges related to January 6th.